Hello, everyone. This is the June layout tour of the 4th Division of the National Model Railroad Association. Today we are very honored to have Todd Von Stup give us a progress report on his budding new N-scale multi-deck layout.
I am Todd Von Stup. I am modeling the Montana Rail Link Columbia and Palouse. It's an N-scale proto-freelance layout. It's multi-deck. First, want to thank Bill Messicar and Burr Stewart for inviting me to share this layout with you, and thank you all for joining. The outline here is we're going to start with the introduction and influence of the layout, the prototype history, and the layout design. Then we'll move on to benchwork construction, and we'll have a slideshow of walking around the scenes of the layout that are in progress. And then we'll finish up with the design and operations, and followed by a Q&A. This is a picture of the Pullman local, or it could even be the Kendrick local, that was based out of Pullman. These cars would be going to Joel. This scene's from the Moscow Mall looking south. This scene right here would represent the west side of where my yard would begin. I fell in love with trains at a very young age. My dad took me to the Tehachapi Loop, and I was hooked instantly. Got into model rareting through him with the Christmas trains that I'm sure we all had, and it became a permanent fixture. I moved around a lot, wasn't able to build layouts, so I worked on just modules. And at the 2004 NMRA convention here in Seattle, I was exposed to the world of N-scale and the potential, just how much you can do with it. I was just blown away. I recently purchased a house and begun building it. So why I chose the Montana Rail Link and the Palouse. The Montana Rail Link obviously isn't in the Palouse. So the basis of it is the best advice I've been getting my whole life about modeling is model what you know. And I went to school at the University of Idaho and Washington State University in 96 to 2000. I spent a lot of my free time rail fanning the area. Watco's Palouse River and Kootenai City Railroad and the Blue Mountain Railroads both merged there in Pullman, interchanged cars with each other. And then in Moscow, I had a complex yard trackage. This scene here over to the right is Moscow, Idaho. This elevator here was a towering feature. All this is gone now. It was all pulled up in 2007. This right here is actually the Columbia and Palouse line, which fell into the hands of the Union Pacific, which we'll cover in the history. And then right here is Feral Gas, and this crossing right here is the Northern Pacific's line, the Palouse and Lewiston, which ran from Spokane down to Lewiston. So again, I frequently rode with the crews and witnessed their operations, which is why I just thought this would be an incredible area to model, just even as a switching layout. Just the town of Moscow as a complex trackage and maneuvers they have to do, or I thought would be really fun to model. So when I was in college, I went with my friends to a rugby tournament in Missoula, and I spent the entire time not at any rugby tournaments, but in the Missoula yard, and I was just instantly hooked on Montana Rail Link. Thought it was great. I love the blue, and the rail fanning there was just fantastic. Why I liked the Montana Rail Link, aside from the colors of it, is that they had all this first and second generation engines. They had Jeep 9s, the Jeep 35s, and there's BNSF bridge traffic. They have the SD45s. It's just, I thought it was just so much fun just seeing such a diversity of engines. And when I was in Moscow, I read up on the history and learned, that the Columbia and Palouse was originally built by the Northern Pacific, and I'll get into the history of that too. The Northern Pacific was looking to build a line over Lolo Pass into Missoula so they could connect Pasco and Missoula. And I always thought it would be interesting if instead of over Lolo Pass, they found another pass and it went through Moscow, and what would have come of the whole area and how much history would have changed and what would have been built and what it could have been. And that's what I'm representing here in this layout. How Montana Rail Link also fits into this is I learned that when the Burlington Northern was selling off the Palouse and Lewiston line, that the Montana Rail Link was a bidder on it. They were looking at purchasing it to get logs from the St. Mary's River Railroad and take them down to the Camas Prairie in Lewiston for the mill down there. Unfortunately, there was torrential flooding in March of '96, so Montana Rail Link backed out, and that's where Watco took over with the ownership of that line. So here's a map of the Montana Rail Link as it does exist. Until its lease is, if anyone's aware, is going to be going back into the hands of the Burlington Northern. So the line runs basically from Billings to Sandpoint, and then with trackage rights into Spokane. Missoula's right here, and where you see my laser, down here is Pullman. So right across here would have been what is freelanced in my layout, and everything left of here is prototypical, except for the yard and then the sidings. So how I decided upon this layout design is I had a desire to model basically those two Waco lines along the Columbia and Palouse. When I was living in Omaha, I became aware of OPSIG and started reaching out to people and was invited to layouts and got really interested in operations. The yard and subdivision operations just totally changed what I thought of model rarity, and I didn't even think that that was possible to get it that prototypical. And throughout the moves, because of that, I didn't have a layout. I didn't know what I was going to do, and so the back of my head was always like, well, what about Laurel Yard and doing Billings and the era of the NPGN and the Burlington and how cool that would be. And then it just one day just dawned on me that if I did a revisionist history of the Palouse region, I could incorporate a yard into it and under the same concept of how Laurel Yard is with 4 lines coming in from different directions. I could do the same thing with the Columbia Palouse and the line down to Lewiston from Spokane and have it merge in Moscow. This picture over here is Makanima. This is a fertilizer dealership. And right back here is a grain elevator. And this scene, it will be on the layout. Here's the influence and design of the operations. I, again, wanted a layout with a focus on the yard and then the locals that run out of the yard. So we have switching and through freights. I wanted to have I didn't want to have a large crew. And back in Omaha, the layouts I ran on would have over 20 people there, which is incredible and a lot of fun. However, in the space I have, I wanted it to be comfortable. I didn't want everybody to be shoulder to shoulder and trying to fight to, see what they're doing. On top of it, I have a multi-deck layout, so I have to plan where the towns are going to be and the operations for each session so that we don't have 2 locals working the same area and everybody's fighting over each other. So that I want to have a small crew running the layout, and I also have a dispatcher and a dispatcher desk, which we'll get to here. I wanted to capture rail fanning and the prototypical operations, and I wanted decent train lengths for the visuals and the operations. Right here, if we look up to the right, this is Moscow Yard under construction here. For kind of an idea of the train lengths here, is we have 2 SD45-2s right here, and this is a 24 car coal train with the caboose. So this kind of gives you an idea of the length. And then the yard tracks right here. In order to capture the sense of travel and just to keep everything space, I purposely designed the towns so that there's train lengths in between. So therefore, there's not a train drag between 2 towns, but then it also, when you're going through it, it really will capture that you're traveling between the 2 towns. During the times of moving around a bunch, Alan Keller videos were my go-to. I would watch these on repeat and just take tons of mental notes. And these ones that I've listed here, which are pretty well known, I just took substantial notes of everything, all the advice that they had. And I try to apply as much of it as possible into my layout. The last thing was to build within a budget and get this up and running within a few years. I really want to run ops and get this going. And then I'll have the lifetime to do scratch building and all these scenery projects and just be able to slow the pace. I'm pretty frantically trying to get as much done, and I've been disciplining myself to once a day doing something that's adding to the progression of the layout. So here's a quick layout overview. Size of this is 21 by 16, and it's in 2 rooms. One room's a small bedroom at 10 feet by 9 feet, and then the other room 11 feet by 15 feet. The area I'm modeling is 98 to 2000. With this multi-deck layout, it's 4 levels. There's 2 staging levels and 2 levels for ops. But there's also scenery on the staging levels. So that brings, with the tape measure here, it's guesstimated it's probably about 191 feet of main line, 117 of it's scenic, and 74 of it's in the Helix. And then the crew we're looking at is about 6 to 7 operators with maximum train lengths of 25 cars. So moving on to the prototype history and the layout design. This photo here is in Pullman. This is after Waco sold the line. It went to Stan Peterson, and he created the Washington-Idaho Railroad, which is a short line that ran to Moscow from Marshall, which is the interchange to the Burlington line that goes into Spokane. These cars are coming from Wilson, Washington at the McGregor fertilizer plant. What's unique about this is this F unit that used to run on this line. It was a leased unit. It was actually a Canadian unit that had been repainted in Black Widow colors. This is coming down Sunshine Hill into Pullman. This is also a Y. This was Pullman Junction. And if you look where my laser pen is, this is the other side of the Y. And this went in to head south to Genesee as a branch line for grain elevators. Here's a map of the Palouse. It kind of looks like the Midwest with a bunch of rail lines crisscrossing over each other. Through the history I've read, there was a period where it was known as the Palouse Wars, where the UP and the now BN, would have been the GNNP, the Hill versus Harrison Wars over this territory. Specifically for my line, it would start in Canal, Washington, and it was started in 1883 under the NP when it was under Henry Villard. There was a economic panic, and Villard was no longer in control of the railroad. And to offset the debts, 1883 was also the same year as the Golden Spike for the NP's Transcontinental. So they had substantial debts they were trying to deal with. And so they put this line off to the Oregon Navigation, which ended up becoming bought by the UP. What I'm doing with my layout is if this line had not been taken over and they had surveyed to Missoula, they wouldn't have sold this off. So that's how I'm justifying this still under BN and then Montana Rail Link ownership. It would run here to Hooper Junction, where there's the interchange with the Union Pacific. And then I model up to La Crosse, there's the Helix, and it would come out, and then I do have Macanima and Colfax, and it runs down to Pullman, over Sunshine Hill to Moscow, and then over to Troy. And then here's the junction where the Palouse line goes down to Lewiston, which I will represent. And then the line that's freelanced runs across here eastward towards Missoula. The original line, when it was under NP ownership, as you follow my pen here, you can see the original right-of-way before the UP came in, and here's the Washi line, and then built their interchange. And then in Canal, Washington, the line comes in. This is the current day BNSF, and right up here is the interchange with the Columbian Basin Railroad, which I also have on represented in staging. Here's a layout map that simplifies everything. We got my railroad, which runs east and west, and then I have the branch lines from Lewiston that run into the circle is the yard, and then in Pullman there's another junction, and it runs up north to Spokane. A lot of options for how to run operations. I'm trying to also incorporate history into the layout. So if this was built and there was a yard here in Moscow, this would have been a division point during the steam era. And since it's situated between here, this would be a rationale for the yard to have operations staged out of here to service all the customers. This area of the Palouse is also known as the Scablands. There's not much out here, railroad-wise or industry-wise. Once you get to La Crosse here, it becomes wheat fields. And then like between Colfax here and Deary is pretty much the heart of the Palouse, and it's where there's lots of lentils, chickpeas, rapeseed that's used to make canola, and there's also wheat as well. So there's a lot of agricultural industry, as well as potlatch from Potlatch lumber. There's substantial lumber mills. There's also in Potlatch kaolin. There's the Milwaukee used to have a spur out of Potlatch to a quarry that exported kaolin sludge. And so that's another potential industry I can have on the layout here. And my layout's going to go to Elk River, and then out here is where it basically disappears into staging. So moving on to the staging plans, coming down to the basement, here's the staircase. The dispatcher desk is situated underneath the staircase. When you come in, if you turn to the left, here is a smaller bedroom. And this is kind of like a courtyard is what we call it. It's a big open room. It moves on. There's another bedroom back here, and then around the corner there's a hallway, and there's a restroom right here, and then there's a laundry room that could also will also serve as a break room. So going back to how I designed this, I tend to scratch as many ideas onto paper as possible, knowing that I'm not going to be able to get them all in. It's good notes for me to know what I want, and then I can start scratching them off as I build what fits and what doesn't. There is a reverse loop here. It does not have a yard that double ends like this. Instead, it's stub end. And the Hooper interchange is now represented in staging. So it comes into staging tracks that run like this, and then another set of stub ended that run like that, along with the reverse loop. And the lower level, which we'll see when we get to after this part here, the first scene is running across the Palouse River, and then it'll come across La Crosse, which is actually now situated over here, and then goes into the Helix. La Crosse has a grain elevator for grain shuttles. I'm also potentially thinking about actually adding another industry. I'm debating if I could get away with having a fertilizer dealer there, so I can bring a local down to that level. And oh yeah, and there's of note that staging will have Union Pacific, the Columbia Basin Railroad, and the BNSF interchanges in staging. We come up to the middle level, and we're heading eastward here. First town we're going to come to is Macanima, which is right here. We'll climb over Crest Hill and Highway 26 into Colfax, which will be a big town where there's a local base, and there's a small yard there. So the Colfax local will go in both directions and come through the South Fork of the Palouse River into Pullman. And Pullman's an important city here. Pullman is a junction point where the lines split. And so we're going to have a line to the P&L staging, but I'm going to have this moved further back. When we get to the slides of the town, you'll understand more of why this has been shifted around. Sunshine Hill will be here with the Bishop Road Railroad crossing and a small siding here, and then the Washington State coal plant. The reason I moved it is because on the west side of Pullman, there's an old grain elevator. There's also a hardware, like lumber dealership that I'd like to get added into there. The main level, and this is why I call it the main level, is this is the most exposed level. The upper level above it is recessed, so this is the most visual level, and it's going to be the most hands-on. So to follow the line, we're going to come up over Sunshine Hill, and then there's Wilson, Washington with the fertilizer dealership. This is the Idaho-Washington state line. And then we come into Moscow, and I'll elaborate further on Moscow when we get there. There's multiple industries here. And then at the next room, this is the room divider right here. It comes around, and there's the yard. The yard tracks, this isn't the schematic. I ended up changing the schematic of how I wanted to do the yard, and I moved the Joel grain elevator to over here as a view break. And then the engine facilities are actually over here now, along with the maintenance away and rib track. Debating whether or not I'm going to do the peas and lentils in Troy. I don't want to get it too busy, but there will be Troy Junction where the P&L line junctions off and goes to Lewiston staging. The Columbia and Palouse continues further westward up into the upper level. And then the upper level, this is going to be recessed, but what we're going to have up here is we're going to come up, and Elk River is going to be here, and I'm going to have a small yard that's along a shelf here, and that's going to be the interchange with the St. Mary's River Railroad, which it can do the kaolin, and there's going to be logs, and then there'll be lumber. So the St. Mary's River Railroad will have, right now they only interchange with the Union Pacific up in Plummer, Idaho, and this would give them access to Burlington Northern through the Montana Rail Link. And the actual prototype, the Milwaukee had extended a branch line down to Elk River to feed logs. So that's what justifies this still being in existence. And then here's where on the Moscow yard is. This will be recessed against the wall here as it climbs into the mountains, and then it'll disappear into staging. And the staging, I'm still kind of figuring out how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to have more stub-ended tracks and a reverse loop. But the scenery is not going to go in, and Graves, Idaho is not going to be here either. So the electronic schematic here, right now I have a 5 amp doing NCE DCC wireless. I have a 5 amp booster, which is backordered right now, so that should cover electronic needs. I have it broken into 5 districts to make the wiring simple, and also for shorts to keep it managed. I have Moscow Yard on its own district, so that's the 5th district, and then I have each level basically as its own district as well. Okay, so now we have that covered. We'll move on to the benchwork construction and walk around the layout. This photo is up north on the P&L during the Washington and Idaho era in the 2000s. This is one of the Burlington Northern grain shuttles that would go to the towns to build up a full grain train. And what's interesting about this photo is you see these tank cars here. Those are destined for fertilizer dealer in Oakdale. And they basically, when they got the grain shuttle, the Washington, Idaho pre-blocked these cars into here so that they wouldn't have to run two trains. They could run a grain shuttle and then still run their local, but with one crew. So when we purchased our home in January 2001, here's what the room originally looked like, all nice and tidy and appealing to home buyers. What I like about this room that instantly screamed a layout to me is the open floor space. I can take these closet doors off. I can cut out the closet posts, which is great for home resale value. So here's another view down the stairs, and then you can see the bedroom back here. What's interesting about the previous owner is he was a contractor, and he built this courtyard area with these outdoor lights and siding for his daughter to kind of represent like a mall, like a shopping mall. But for me, it looks more like I can make it into a depot. So I plan on painting these clapboards NP depot colors, which there's also some over here, which I think will add a lot of interest. The great thing, I want to give a shout out to my wife, is that she's totally on board for this and loves this idea. So it's really cool that she's giving me this much space and creativity, like freedom to do all this. And this is what it looks like of May 31st, 2002. So right down here, we were talking about, this is where Colfax is going to be. And you can see the one of the Helixes over here. And it kind of just gives you an idea of how the layout's coming along here. So in May 2021, I just dug in and decided let's get going on it. And I started by painting the upper walls a sky color, put masonite backdrops on that part. And then I started floor taping where the layout's going to go. On to the next was the benchwork. Oh, actually, I wanted to have the benchwork built into the walls, free hanging. So it created foot room, and I thought this would be the most financially affordable way to build the layout, considering wood's prices shot up so much during the pandemic. I did a lot of research on how multi-deck layouts had been built, and this one I kind of took numerous ideas. One with the gussets, but the other one was these vertical supports, and I had this one sticks further out and this one's further recessed, and I found it creates incredible strength. I've been able to put my full body weight on this without any movement whatsoever. And as we moved along, here's the closets ripped out and the shelves being put in, and I did the same idea for the supports with these verticals. Spare room closet, hacked out the support and did the same style as in the other closet. However, this board right here, I took that back out because I didn't like, and I realized that's where the upper level really needs to be recessed back here, so we don't distract from the scenes and operations. Then the electronics section, I decided I was going to put it on a board on wheels so I can keep everything in a combined state, and I can wire it through terminal connectors. So if I need to do some major work, I can pull this drawer out or disconnect it, and it just makes it easy to work on. And so I have ABS signals on this layout. So I have them powered through here, and then the Tortoise machines are powered through its own supply that's connected right here. And then the NCE broken into the 5 districts with the circuit breakers through here. We're talking about the dispatcher desk. Took off the closet door and built this easy little desk here. I have radios. I've still been trying to figure out how I want to do this because I know of COVID, no one wants to be breathing on the same walkie-talkies that everybody else is. So I've got 6, and I think that we can even do it with if each person has it, but I think we'll have to deal with feedback issues. Original thought was there'd be one for the dispatcher, one for the yard master, one for the crews in each room. So there'd be 4 radios to communicate. This also gives another view. There's an entryway into the basement back here. This is the laundry room, break room, and the restrooms right here. And to begin the layout tour, starting in lower staging as an eastbound, here are the stub end tracks I was talking about. These 5 tracks can hold 25 car trains, and these ones are shorter. I can't recall exactly how many cars they hold. And then it loops around, and then there's another group of tracks. Actually, you can start seeing them. I've gotten further along since I took these photos, but there's 4 more staging tracks along right here, and then the reverse loop. So as we're coming out of the layout, it's right here, and as you can see, the view block and first scene, there's the UP Washi line crossing over. And as you saw, that's the UP Washi line right here. Here's the line breaking off across the Palouse River, which is represented right here. The cool thing is about this bridge and this river here is the bridges on this layout were built as branch line bridges. And since this is a main line, I am looking at how the Northern Pacific built their bridges in Montana. So I get to pick and choose which bridges I like in Montana and then prototypically recreate them right here. So that's the plan for the moment. But to get ops going, I built this temporary bridge so we can run trains right across it while I work on building that scene. And then we move on to Hooper, Washington. These grain bins right here would be this scene right here. And this old highway 26 crossing is right here, and we'll have a crossing gates set up. And then it moves on to right here, which is a siding. And it's going to be known as the Willow Creek siding. And so the rail line runs right along here, and Willow Creek crosses back and forth, and it has a lot of trees in a arid climate, which I think is beautiful. So I'm going to have Willow Creek, this area that's not filled in yet is going to be benchworked in at a lower level so we can have the creek and have it come out and then cross back over to this siding. And then in the back, we'll have Highway 26 right back here. This goes into La Crosse. This was originally the UP line that made its way up to Spokane, and it connected right here in the junction. In order to fit this in, though, I had to do a mirror flip, and so La Crosse would actually be this way, pointed in that direction. I didn't want to have people getting on their knees and reaching back in a confined area, so I have this open area right here where we'll have La Crosse and its stub to this elevator here. And the fertilizer dealership, here's the McGregor company, that is a big company out in the Palouse. They have a distributorship right here. And here's La Crosse right here. There's going to be a fascia view block right here as this goes into the Helix. You can see it from this side here. It's going to come up. This open area right here, how it cuts back, is actually on the next level that we're going to see. This is going to be where we're going to go into Macanima, and that's going to extend all the way across and then around corner right here. So the Helix will come out, as we're going to see here in a moment, and come into Macanima. It comes out of Macanima. We're going to have semaphore signals right here at the beginning of the next siding. There was semaphores for quite an extended period on the Montana Rail Link, and since it fits my era, so I'm going to have one set that operates, it's functional. And in Macanima, which is a previous slide that I showed you, here is another one of the McGregor fertilizer dealers and a grain elevator, which I'll have both in this scene. After Macanima, it climbs up Crest Hill on its way into Colfax and crosses Highway 26. That's going to be this scene to break these two towns. And then it comes down the hill into Colfax. Colfax Yard's on a curve. I can't get the curve on the outside just due to the way the room's shaped. So I'm going to have this section right here is going to be Colfax. Here's the Y for the original UP main line in this trestle, and that would go on up to Spokane, and the Columbia Palouse would continue down here towards Moscow. Not sure I'm going to do the Y. If I do the Y, it'll just be just modeled but not functional. I don't think I could fit it in. There's a depot right here, which I'm going to model, and then there's a P elevator, which we're going to get. That's a big feature here. The line goes down south and then takes a hard turn east. And right down here, which is going to be represented right here, is another P distributor. So I'll have lots of box cars, and it's just a fun operating area. In between Colfax and Pullman, the line meanders along the South Fork of the Palouse River, cutting across it numerous times and cutting into hills, such as right here. And then here's a truss bridge right here. The way I was previously talking about making sure that people aren't stepping on top of each other, Moscow Yard's going to have 2 people working there, and we have Moscow, the town, right here, and Colfax right behind it. So I thought this level would into the room in both rooms would be a great opportunity to just do scenery. There wouldn't be any body shuffling. And then we get into Pullman. As I said, I've been wanting to model Pullman for quite some time, and it's an extremely difficult town to model because, as you can see, it lies between 4 hills. The line comes in through right here. This right here is the Union Pacific station. The original line actually cut across on a bridge here, and then there was a level crossing here when it went on to Moscow. The lines didn't combine. In 98, it was 97 or 98, Waco, because of washouts along the line, combined the 2 lines and created a junction right here. They would interchange here, and then one of the trains, depending on what work they had to do, would go over Sunshine Hill and do the work for both railroads in Moscow. This is the Northern Pacific depot right here, and the NP yard for the locals was based out of right here. I am modeling the junction. It is going to go right back under here, but I can't get, just due to space, I can't get both. It'd be fantastic to do both, but it's just space limitations. And then Washington State has a power plant, and it was a coal power plant, and they would occasionally receive cars. So I'm going to have that modeled in here as well. Further over here is the grain elevator and then the lumber dealership, which is going to be situated right here. Down past this bridge right here is where there would be the 2 railroads would interchange cars with each other. And that's also where the spur into the Washington State coal plant is. And so that's going to be right here. And this is where the lines are going, or not the line, sorry, the siding's going to end. And then it goes up Sunshine Hill. And Sunshine Hill goes into the big 6.5 turn helix. So this is by far the biggest helix on the layout. The other helixes are like 2 or 3 turns. This is 6.5. So I don't want to have trains. I know the trains sitting in helixes can get boring. So to try to, the train lengths should help with that. There's also going to be the Bishop Street grade crossing. So the crossing gates are going to come down. So once the train leaves and is into the helix, you'll be able to watch the gates go up. There's going to be an open scene on the helix right here, climbing Sunshine Hill, and it'll disappear again and then reappear outside here. This is the line that Sunshine Hill takes and comes down into Wilson, Washington. It's right here, and then both lines into University of Idaho. The original Columbia, this is the P&L line, the Northern Pacific line. The Columbia and Palouse went along 270. The creek that ran along here just about washed out this rail line, and it was rebuilt as a trail now. I think it's the Bill Chapman Trail. But since the Waco decided to go with the NP line, that's what I'm doing. And so here's Wilson, Washington. Right here we have the Pasco to Laurel Daily Manifest. This would be situated right here. And behind here are the fertilizer cars for the McGregor fertilizer dealership, which is right here. And this would be the Columbia and Palouse line, and this would be the siding. So these cars would be on the siding, and behind would be the old main line, which both stubbed. Actually, there's a small runaround track for the engines, but I'm just doing this stub. And then Moscow. Moscow, here, I'll go through history here. This was unique in that there's 3 railroads that came through here. There's the Northern Pacific, the Union Pacific, and the Great Northern. The Great Northern came and ended here and interchanged with the Union Pacific and Northern Pacific. This is the Columbia and Palouse, which ended right behind here. And the Northern Pacific's line came along here and went south to Lewiston. So since the Columbia and Palouse line ends here, and if NP was still in ownership of both these, it would have continued with the Northern Pacific's line. So we have the propane dealership, we have the seed elevator, we have Kreitz, which is a seed distributor. This is rapeseed from Columbia Grain. There's Dumas Seed, which is a spur right here. And then as you can kind of see back here, this is where Wilson is. Any local that works Moscow has to really think their moves and how they're going to pre-block their train in order to work this site. And that's exactly how the Waco used to have to do it. When I'd sat on the engines when they were doing this, they could spend 2 to 3 hours in the Pullman yard pre-blocking their train so that when they pulled into town, they'd have this area right here to pull their cars out and get their engines sandwiched in the middle and then shove everything back here to work both sides, and then shove back out, combine their train, and then they'd head back. It was really fun to watch all that. So as we were getting more into the freelance section of the layout, here's where the yard begins. Here's Moscow right here. Here's caboose track, and then here's the yard switch track. This is the main line. This goes to the Joel grain elevator. This is the siding and yard lead. These are the arrival departure tracks. These are the classification tracks and the runarounds, and then from the different direction, and the yard curves around. For the classification tracks, 3 of them stub and the other 2 run around. So I was able to get most of the yard to run around, so it's double-ended, except for these 3 classification tracks. And here's the east side of the yard. This is where the engine terminal would be, the old roundhouse that's no longer used. It's really just used for maintenance waste storage. We'll have the sand and gas tracks, the runaround track. Here's the gas and sand cars, maintenance away, and then the rip track. And over time, I'm going to get buildings and get this more, just get this filled in. And I think this will be a lot of fun to work on. The next town outside of that is Troy, Idaho. And this is where the junction is. The P&L line ran down here, and then it goes down to Lewiston through a steep, I think it's a 2.8 grade. They actually back in the steam era, they needed helpers to get up, and there's up in Helmer, which is just outside here, was actual turntable. They used to turn them and run them back. For here, we're going to have Pullman Junction. So here's the end of this is the end of the yard. Junction's going to be right here, and it's going to run for the line down to Lewiston is going to run along here, and then along this outside is going to be the Lewiston staging. And right here would be where the junction is for the line that continues on over the mountains and towards Elk River. So we're going to go into a helix, and it's going to come up, and up here, as you can see where this furring strip is, this is where it's going to be recessed for Elk River. This right here is where the original Milwaukee line came in. As you can see, there's the depot, which is no longer there, and then the tracks, and then they had their yard and all the log tracks, and then all the logging lines went in all different directions. So we'll have that here, and then and a siding, and then it'll hang back recessed towards upper staging, which would be recessed along here, and then we'll just have staging tracks staggered, and then a reverse loop on top here that will complete the layout. So how I'm designing operations. This picture here is of Livingston. This is the old MP shops that Montana Rail Link works their engines in. I think this is a really, really neat photo. And by the way, the photos I've been showing have been taken by Mike and Tom Danaman, Matt Farnsworth, and David Honan. I think they should get credit for letting me use those. And we have operations crews. This is how I'm planning it. We're gonna have a dispatcher crew caller that's gonna work in the dispatcher desk. That'll have all the train cards and the timetables. There'll be a yard master who also work the east end of the yard as an auxiliary, because the yard's going to be pretty busy. And then we'll have a full-time yard switcher on the west side. There'll be 2 road crews that also work as the locals. When they're done with their locals, we can run through freights. There'll be 1 crew that runs through freights and then also transfers and other pre-block trains that make drops in the yard. It's possible I can get a 7th person in. However, I've been really focused on crew comfort, and I want to make sure that it's an enjoyable operation. I want to have slow ops, but challenging ops. I don't want it to be stressful in a race against the clock. I do want to have a clock. I want to have it broken into 1 12-hour set, like an AM shift per op session, and then the next op session is a PM shift, so basically 12 hours, and just keep it really relaxed and fun, and just, it's challenging at the same time, and just some interesting moves and occasional traffic jams and how we're going to get ourselves out of that mess. For scheduled trains, before we go into that, here's Hooper, Washington. This is heading west towards the junction to interchange with the Union Pacific. Grain silos here, and then the road crossing right here. So for scheduled trains, I'm basing this all on how the Montana Rail Link runs on its line and how the BNSF runs their trains. On the west end, Montana Rail Link in the early 90s experimented with the then BN on running a local out of Missoula west to Spokane. That was very short-lived. They found it was, for both sides, the Spokane yard was very congested. The Burlington Northern and Montana Rail Link found it best to send the Pasco to Laurel trains blocked with a section of Montana Rail cars. And so in Missoula, they would tag their cars heading west, and then the eastbounds would get dropped off in Missoula. So I'm practicing the same with the Burlington or the BNSF's Pasco to Laurel. So we'll have pre-blocks that need to get taken out and added, heading in both directions. And then Montana Rail currently has the Laurel to Missoula, which is like a very long-range local that handles the freight. So we're going to have something similar. It would be the Missoula to Moscow and back. And then we're going to have a local that heads the westbound to Connell to do the interchanging with the Union Pacific, the Columbia Basin Railroad, and the Burlington Northern. If you're curious about why the Columbia Basin is, they have a rapeseed, like a canola processing plant. And doing some research, I found that cars would be processed either in Great Falls or out in, I think it might be Reardon, but it's somewhere along the Columbia Basin. And then we'll have the Montana Rail locals. We'll have the Moscow local, which serves specifically Moscow, but the Colfax local, which handles the towns below. We'll have the Elk River local, which runs to the upper level and handles the interchange and lumber mill, the interchange with the St. Mary's River Railroad and a lumber mill there. We have the Palouse local that comes from the north on the P&L line that's going to come out and is based in Palouse. It'll come down to Moscow, set out its cars there and pick up its new ones and then return back. And then we'll have the Lewiston local, which heads to Lewiston for its nightly change of cars and then comes back. We'll have a grain shuttle that runs the grain trains. Anybody's familiar with those grain train cars? Those are marked for the PCC and the Blue Mountain Railroad, which were specifically for this line. Well, Amtrak Big Sky, which is based on the Portland Builder. In the 90s, Amtrak pitched about rerouting the Portland Builder through Lewiston and then up the P&L through Pullman, thinking that would add more passenger revenue. However, for reasons beyond my knowledge or understanding, both Pullman and Lewiston declined that, so it's routed the way it is today. So I'm doing the Big Sky as one of those trains that runs from Seattle down through Denver. And then we'll have BNSF eastbounds and detours. And there's one train on here I've been debating that I have on this list, but it's possible doing the old BN Highball, which is the Spokane to Lewiston. If I did that, it's going to depend on traffic and how well the yard functions. But if there's room for it, I think that would be a fun additional train to run. So at this point, I'm open for any questions or suggestions. And here's some contact information. Here's my email if you wish to get a hold of me. I also have an Instagram that I post pictures of my progress. So yeah, thanks for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Todd. Does anyone have any questions?
This is Bill Messicar. Did you put most of your track on directly onto the plywood sub base, or did you use? Are you going to use cork? Or what kind of a roadbed are you using for your track outside the yards?
I'm using cork roadbed.
Okay.
Yep. The only track that's on plywood is the staging yards.
Very good. What are you using for turnouts?
I'm using two. For the yard, using the micro engineering snap switches, and all else are the Atlas. I'm going to have tortoise on some of the sidings, just so it'll be easier for operations, and then other ones will have the Caboose Hobby ground throws.
And are you doing code 55 or code 80?
I'm doing code 55.
Yeah. And what about wheels?
Well, I'm using all metal wheel sets is the ultimate goal.
And what brand of metal wheel sets do you like?
I've been using the Fox Valley wheel sets. However, those have been, along other things, have been more increasingly difficult to find. So I think after this, I'll have to check. I think I'll be moving on to the Exact Rail wheel sets.
Mm-hmm.
On your micro engineering turnouts, have you gotten those recently, or are these turnouts that you've had for quite a while?
Both. Funny for both Atlas and micro engineering, left-handed turnouts are near impossible to find anywhere.
That's why I was wondering. I've had some micro engineering 5B ladder turn out, so I'm back order for a year and a half.
Yeah, I've reached out to a few places that I've had difficulty obtaining things. Microengineering right now is up for sale. On top of their ladder, those HO ladders that they recently put out, they weren't expecting the amount of popularity with them. And so they've had difficulty keeping up with the demand and the materials on top of everything else going on with COVID. And I'm not sure what the future of the company is right now with it being up for sale. So, of one note, I did reach out to NJ International. Those like the grade crossings and signals that they make, I really like them. And I spoke with the person who owns it. They haven't had anything out for like 2 years in N scale, but he told me that they actually should be having more product here this fall. So it's something to keep an eye out if you're a fan of their products in an N scale.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Todd, this is Larry Sloan. I wanted to say I enjoyed your presentation and didn't really have, I don't think I had any questions for you except for where are you located?
I'm in West Seattle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think it'd be cool to see that MRL layout in action at some point. I'm sure you've got a ways to go. It looks like you got a lot of plywood like I do.
Yeah, I'm fully racing. I'd love to be up by next sound rails. That's the goal, but I mean that's really precedent. I don't want to be testing the layout on the operations on sound rails. I'd like to get a crew going and see what needs to be fixed and fine tuned.
I hear that.
It's like we all talk about. We know how we think, but how everybody else thinks is, I need to get a bunch of minds in here to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I need to do the same thing actually, but I don't have enough track down yet for that. So there you go.
It looks like you've got that town next to the main yard there. You could run some pretty fun trains just between the yard and the town.
I've thought about that too.
Yeah.
I've actually been wiring both of them, so that has been a thought of mine. I've been so focused on just getting the main line completed. But I could take a detour and focus on that and have maybe 2 or 3 people operating just on that upper level. The main level is complete. I just need to complete wiring it, and then it's operational.
That's cool.
Thanks.
I'm sure there are a bunch of us who would sign up.
All right, great. Maybe I'll do that.
You got 18.
I'll talk to you more about that.
Yeah, you got 18 potential operators right here.
All right, cool.
Todd, this is Gordon Kennedy from North Seattle. That's a really impressive project. I really like it. What are your thoughts about lighting in between the layers, the levels?
That's a great question. I forgot to cover that. I was talking to Lee Marsh about that. I'm using LED rope lighting underneath it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I've done a little experimenting. So far, it's working great. I think when I get to the upper level is going to be kind of, I have an idea of how I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to build a valance along the ceiling and run the lights that way so it's not in your eyes and it's projected down. I'm just trying to think of cost-effective but aesthetically pleasing ways to do the lighting.
Yeah, I've been associated with Roy Cutler's huge N-scale layout in Tacoma, and lighting was always better to think about it first.
Yeah.
That was our experience there.
Todd, this is Lee Marsh. Hey, I just really enjoyed your presentation and learned more about rail operations around Moscow and Pullman in an hour than I learned in 3 years living there. So great job. And that was an awesome idea to bring Montana Rail Link over the bitter routes into Moscow. That's incredibly clever.
Have you thought about what you're going to use for managing your trains as far as car cards, the switch list, waybills?
Yeah, I'm going to do car cards and waybills, and then I'm going to have train order cards typed up. So I'll have the instructions of how the train should be blocked and the work it needs to be done. Operating on everyone else's layouts, every time I go, I come back with so many thoughts and ideas. So I've just been collecting them all. So once I get up there, but right now it's real focused on car cards, waybills, and train order cards. Those have personally been my favorite way to do it for layouts of this size.
Well, if there are no other questions, we can wrap it up and look forward to our first visit to Todd's layout sometime in the relatively near future.
And if anyone's
Maybe after they
interested,
open the West Seattle Bridge.
that's coming up. What, September 12th is what they said?
Yeah, I think you have a new deadline before Sound Rails.
Well, and if anyone's interested, feel free to send me an email from that slide. I can give it back out, or I put it in the chat. And then I could compile an ops list. So when the time comes that I'm ready for operations, I could send it out to everyone.
The only thing I know of is that Bill and I wanted to thank you for 2.5 years of enjoyable layout tours in the last 2 years. Bill Messicar is our new president-elect for the 4th Division, so Lee Marsh is going to take over his helping me with the recruiting of layout tour presenters. And we plan to resume these layout tours with the September meeting. And so you all have the summer off from the second Saturday until we get to September.
I
Go
just
ahead,
want
Rob.
to remind people about the narrow gauge convention. But,
Of course. Go ahead.
Russ mentioned this at the beginning, but unless you've lived under a rock, I think you probably know about this. But we're a group of us, several of us on this call actually, Russ, myself, and I think Greg Wright's on, though not visible. We're hosting the National Narrow Gauge Convention in Tacoma, September the 1st to the 4th. It's actually international. We've got people coming from all over the world. Hopefully 600 or 700 attendees. So first of all, please come along. We've got stunning clinics that Russ has arranged on every aspect of modeling. A narrow gauge tree is just the same as a standard gauge tree. So please come and learn something from that. And of course, we have, I think, 38 layouts now listed on our website to go and visit all around the region. Some that, which are new to me, so most of them outstanding. Most of them are narrow gauge bent, not all of them. We do have some non-narrow gauge layouts out there too, including some, I think, hosted by people on the call here, like Lee, for example. So hopefully you can come. I'm actually just been working on the website this morning. So seattlennngc.com, seattlennngc.com. We really hope to see a lot of local modelers there to attend the clinics and the layout tours and actually have, excuse me, and have fun with us. I hope to see you then.
Let me follow up on that. I'm the volunteer coordinator for the event, looking for people to volunteer to do clinic rooms and that sort of thing. If you can't make the whole event because of being a holiday weekend, get hold of me because I need single day volunteers and I'd love to put you in, let you get a taste of what's going on in a narrow gauge convention by being a volunteer, and you won't have to pay a registration fee if you're just going to be there for a day or something like that. So my email's around in a lot of different places. It's Gregory Wright 2002@yahoo.com.
Look forward to more of this because we're hosting the PNR convention in Tacoma in the spring of 2023. And I think we're also discussing trying to host the NMRA National in about 3 years. So we all need to exercise our convention muscles in terms of figuring out how to do all the different things involved. So this narrow gauge convention coming up in September is a real opportunity. You know, if you have fun there, you're going to have opportunities here to have fun without having to do long distance travel.
I wanted to change topics back to the layout tours just briefly before we wrap up today, and say that, you know, what we saw today with Todd's layout work in progress is a fantastic example of things that I think we're looking for in terms of additions to layouts that are substantially complete. I know I, for one, I think maybe many people on the call really enjoy seeing how people are, you know, designing, coming up with historical information and actually how they're building their layout. So we're looking for layouts that are not just complete, but layouts that are under construction or just getting underway. Or, you've got drawings of things, anything I think is of interest to our group. So looking for volunteers there.
Burr and to Bill for this last 2.5 years of some really great layout tours. And
Thank you.
Lee stepping up to move on forward with it and to keep Burr going. It's really made Saturdays a lot of fun. So thank you guys.
Our pleasure.
Well,
And thanks, Lee, for stepping in there, and for Burr for a wonderful, wonderful job as host, and Magnus editing those. We've got a great YouTube channel. And if you guys see a layout out somewhere that you're traveling to, talk up, seeing if that guy would be interested, and let Lee and Burr know. That's how we get a lot of these new in all stages of construction.
yeah, and of course the layout doesn't have to be anywhere near here. It could be in Alaska, or it could be in Kentucky, or anywhere else.
Amen.
We're a hardcore group here. We can watch a layout tour on almost anything. All right. Well, with that, we'll sign off for this month and see you in September. And I hope you, in the meantime, have a chance to have some much fun with trains. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
All right, thanks.